Well, for more insight into this topic, earlier I spoke to Dr. Peter Ching Hong, professor of medicine and an infectious disease specialist at the University of California, San Francisco. And he begins by giving his take on that dispute between Moderna and NIH.
To me, looking at the data, it just seems weird that you don't acknowledge one side of the equation. In science, we do teamwork all the time, and it's very much part of the religion and science to equally acknowledge the contributions of all of the team members. Of course, when you add the element of economics and business and money, it gets a little bit muddier.
Indeed. Now, we know something that was causing, obviously, some waves is this conversation about patent waivers. Where does that discussion currently stand? And are we likely to see any sort of progress on that?
I think, given the time that's elapsed since this movement towards dismantling intellectual property started, first with South Africa and then with a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon, including a nod by the Biden administration, no action has actually occurred. But with that said, intellectual property and dismantling patents are only one part of the complex equation that we need really to get a vaccine into arm of someone in another part of the world.
And I want to talk about Merck and Pfizer recently signing their deal with a UN agency to manufacture its antiviral pill globally. So that's licensing, though, not granting a patent. Why do you think these companies are taking that route?
Because there's a lot of pressure around the world for these companies to act responsibly. And one would even say, cynically, that maybe Pfizer acted in that way because Merck did, because Merck's oral COVID pill, molnupiravir, actually was, the data was released first, and they immediately said, we will have tiered pricing, we will share the recipe with the developed world in voluntary licensing and share the know-how and manpower, person power. And everyone was really impressed. And then Pfizer came out with their data, which is around Paxlovid, but they took a little while and then they announced, okay, we'll do the same thing we did for Merck. I think it's easier to share the recipe, so to speak, with a pill versus a vaccine. Who knows how long the pill would last? It probably has a finite lifespan before the next best pill. I think with vaccines, they're probably a little bit more valuable, they're like the jewels. There was a very, very different and immediate approach around the COVID pills by Merck and Pfizer compared to what we've been seeing with vaccines, which seem to be much more complex, much more mired in controversy, and much slower, even though we need it much more urgently.
So do you know how much of a game changer then having this antiviral pill so much more widely available, how much of a difference do you think that will make to the global fight against COVID?
Well, I think we'll make some difference, but ultimately it's a short-term solution. First of all, you have to have access to the pills. It's kind of a beer to take, 4 pills twice a day for Merck, 3 pills twice a day for Pfizer. You have to think about birth control for one of them, which is the Merck pill. You have to diagnose someone in early infection, meaning someone actually has to be within the first 3 to 5 days, ideally, of knowing that they were infected to have benefit from the pill. So that means and requires that countries invest in diagnostics, which is much easier said than done.
Now, I want to talk more generally about patents and pharmaceutical companies. Why are they so valuable to big pharma's bottom line versus, say, perhaps their other products?
Patents are really the holy grail of big pharma, and they hold on to it like there's no tomorrow. And that's because, the generic industry around the world has become so sophisticated, so adept, full of scientific rigor that, you invest in a particular drug or device, it requires a lot of the company's resources. You let out the recipe and all of a sudden, all of those investments are subject to whimsically losing them. Investors are not happy, the shareholders are not happy. The whole fate of the company, so to speak, could be at risk. And because companies say for every one blockbuster of a drug or a vaccine, there are probably hundreds that were left on the wayside, but each of them required lots of investment. So I think that's from the company's perspective.